Things are getting hot and heavy out there in the world of free agency, but no major players have signed yet. It's the biggest news is that Shane Bieber didn't opt out of his contract, and he's going to stay with the Toronto Blue Jays, maybe for some unfinished business. One guy that we're keeping a close tab on is Kyle Schwarber, and the Schwarber watch continues today. We're going to talk about him. The Cubs, according to experts, not expected to be in the race for Kyle Tucker. We'll get into that. And also, don't expect them to spend a lot of money on one position group. We'll get into that as well. Former Cub could be the bench manager or the bench coach for a National League team and more. We'll get into all that right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. So like, subscribe, thumbs up, hit the bell. Let's get this thing started. Good to see you guys today. And go Cubs. Love the sound of that. Go Cubs. Peace, everybody. Mick Gillespie, Cubs Baseball channel. Been a Cubs fan for a long time. And like you, I love the team. And sometimes maybe I put my heart out there, and maybe that's what's going on right now. But I do feel like the Cubs need to pursue Kyle Schwarber. And I'm going to kind of get into this as we go through free agent season. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but you start to hear these reports about what the Cubs aren't going to do. And one of those things right off the bat is, according to experts, and it's not just one, but a few different experts, don't expect the Cubs to pay the Kyle Tucker money. And that's, over $350 million, $400 million plus. Cubs apparently are okay with him walking away. And, to me, it's like, I'm sure ownership's going, hey, isn't this the same guy who hurt his wrist and then couldn't buy a hit for a while? Or no, I'm sorry, hurt his hand and then couldn't buy a hit for a while. Are we going to invest that kind of money in one guy and then he gets hurt and we get nothing out of it? The problem to me, and Jesse Rogers, who does a great job, is basically telling Cubs fans that he just, Cubs probably aren't going to pay, the money to get Tucker. And he also mentioned that that the Phillies haven't shut the door on a Kyle Schwarber reunion, but you're talking about the Cubs needing to replace that production in the lineup, and they don't want to pay, $35 to $40 million on one player. And then, of course, over, 10 or 11 years, right? And that's what Tucker could command. So we'll see how the market is. The Cubs gave up a bunch to get him, and he's a good player. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But it's a risk. Anytime you see a guy that's injured and doesn't produce, and you're thinking, we're spending that much money on one guy, it is a risk. But you look at the teams that won the World Series, they have those players that were in the World Series, that win the World Series, those are the guys that lead the team. Vlad Guerrero Jr., without him, Toronto's not, in extra innings to win it all. Without Shohei Ohtani or Freddie Freeman or Mookie Betts, the Dodgers wouldn't be in that situation. So, here you are, looking at the fact that, don't expect the Cubs to spend that money. And then, of course, you go, okay, well, what about Kyle Schwarber? Make the case that Schwarber would be worth that as a DH. Well, first off, Shohei Ohtani won the league's most valuable player as a DH when he couldn't pitch. Now, I know when he pitches and he hits, he's like Babe Ruth. I mean, really better than Babe Ruth when you talk about like a season, because, he's doing both things really well at the same time. But Schwarber kind of proves the point that in this day and age of analytics, having a DH that produces like him is, it's really worth it. You're talking about Kyle Schwarber, who's 32 years old, and I don't think there's any slowing down in his prime. I feel like this is a guy that could play into his 40s and be productive, right? He hits a ton of home runs against left-handers. That makes him different. His 56 home runs, he hit 23 against lefties. His barrel rate, for those analytic types, was over 20% last year. That's, to me, something that when the guy makes contact, great things happen. He's doing more of that. He doesn't miss fastballs, right? 35 of his home runs came off of fastballs. But the thing that I think that the analytics crowd really likes is that over 31% of his balls pulled, right, were in the air. That's kind of like Barry Bonds type stuff. Where he's pulling the ball and keeping them fair. And Barry Bonds was the best that I ever saw it doing that. I mean, there was a time when you just didn't really want to pitch to Barry Bonds. He was all bulked up on steroids, and he was a great hitter on top of that. And he just smashed the ball, right? So 39 of Schwarber's 56 home runs were pulled, even though he has power all over the field. He's just getting better and better at taking advantage of that pull side power. This is a guy that if he decided that he wanted to back up and hit for average, he could. Kind of the opposite of Hall of Famer Rod Carew, who felt like he could have hit maybe 500 home runs. He could have led the league in home runs, but he was more of a contact guy, and he wanted to get on base. Believe it or not, Kyle Schwarber has that ability as well. He's gone into slugger mode because that's what baseball wants. They want guys that drive the ball in the air and hit them out of the ballpark. Now, some other teams that you're starting to hear, including Jesse Rogers, making a very interesting point that Kyle Schwarber could end up with the Yankees, even though the Yankees have a DH right now. Things happen. And can you imagine the home runs that he would hit in that short porch at Yankee Stadium being in the same lineup as Aaron Judge? The Cincinnati Reds are a team that you're hearing could possibly go out and spend on a Kyle Schwarber to go with all of those young star players that they have. Or maybe they trade some of those guys. Who knows? But can you imagine having to face Kyle Schwarber in that lineup? Would make that team a whole lot better. Obviously the Phillies are in the mix for him. I wouldn't be surprised if some other teams don't pop in there. And the Tigers could be one of those teams as well. Can you imagine the Javi Baez and Kyle Schwarber reunion? But I'm still feeling like this is a possibility for the Cubs and one that they should really examine. And I'm sure that they are, because you're going to have to do something to find the production that you're giving away by not having Kyle Tucker. And if you put Schwarber in the same lineup as Owen Casey, can think about the growth that you would have in that particular position. Love the outfield there. And then obviously having him at the DH spot. And I know some of you guys, and I say this all the time, hey, Moises Ballesteros, really good hitter. He's not even close to the threat level that Schwarber would bring. And I think he's going to be a very good big league hitter, but maybe you swap him for, say, a catcher from Baltimore if they give him up. Retchman, that's who I want. Maybe that's why the Cubs made that deal to give Kittredge back to the Orioles. Like, hey, guys, we want to work a deal out maybe for somebody else here. You can have him back. We're not even going to charge you. Talking about the Cubs and their future, I'm going to get there in a second, but I want to remind you guys that we have A lot of stuff going on at Mick Nation AveD. I talk about this all the time. Got the hats in. Some of you guys have gotten hats. Got some great text or really emails back from people that won hats. I love the fact that you guys want to wear the gear, that you like our logo right there. That's it. That logo. Pretty cool. And we appreciate that so much and want to continue to outfit you guys. So make sure that you check out AveD. It's all free. Pick games. Right now it's NFL because baseball's over. Maybe we ought to do put a poll up there on whether Kyle Schwarber will sign with the Cubs or not. What do you think about that? Yeah, I think we're going to do that. So anyway, check it out. AveD, Mick Nation. That's our Web3 home. All right. This was not surprising to me either, that the Cubs reportedly not spending for relief pitching. Now, I would love to hear the opposite. Hey, expect the Cubs to spend some money because we'd get excited about the possibility of players that we could potentially get if the Cubs were spending some money. But that is not the reports that we're getting right now. And trading Kittredge back to Baltimore was kind of one of those things where it was like, okay, this bullpen's probably going to be totally gutted from last year. Just when you talk about the pitchers that are free agents, and I'm sure the Cubs will try to do the same thing they did last year and build a bullpen from guys around the league that might not be as expensive right now as they potentially will be down the line, right? But the Athletics kind of leading the charge, basically saying league sources told the Athletic not to expect the Cubs to jump in on big-name free agent relievers. Talking about that. So I guess that eliminates, some of those guys that we kind of had our fingers crossed on. Don't you guys want to hear, some trumpets when your reliever comes in? Well, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case for the Cubs. Some of those relievers are worth a ton of money. And, to get an Edwin Diaz or a Devin Williams or a Robert Suarez, you're going to have to spend some money, right? And you may be talking about $15 or $20 million, and the Cubs not going to do that. Maybe they go out and make another trade for a Ryan Presley, which absolutely bombed last year. Bombed. And you make a deal for this guy. He didn't even make it through the season. It was kind of sad watching that. But then, the emergence of a guy like Daniel Palencia. What about a Ben Brown, who's kind of proven that he's not going to be a starter, but he's got back-end bullpen stuff. And if you don't want Jackson Wiggins to start, I know he's had some injury issues, but he's got an amazing arm. Is he someone that you could throw in the bullpen? Are there some other guys who the Cubs have in their system that maybe could get an opportunity to help get some outs? There'll be free agents. They'll kind of sit back like they always do and see where the deal is, to try to, buy low and get high returns or, sell high and, and get a lot back for a player that maybe they don't think is going to help them as much as, maybe the resources that they get back from that player, right? And that's just business. But, it's that time of year where the Dodgers are going to go out and try to buy everybody they can. And in a way, you kind of feel a little frustrated if you're a Cubs fan that, that there's not going to be, hey, we're not going to be in the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes. I don't know that Cody Bellinger's a good fit. I think Kyle Schwarber would be, and then you start going down the line. Are they going to be in the mix for Alex Bregman? What would that look like? And then maybe some of the pitchers. You've heard of Dylan Cease, maybe being a guy that they want. He started out with the organization. All those things said, the Cubs are going to probably do the same thing that they have done, and that's spend some money, but also try to be strategic with their resources. Kind of playing the market. I I don't feel like the Cubs are being small market, but they're not like the Reds, which I can't even imagine. And I just talked about the fact that the Reds might or reportedly could be interested in Kyle Schwarber, who's from Ohio. But I just don't think that they're going to put that money out. When Ken Griffey Jr. hadn't played in years and he was their highest paid player a few seasons ago, it shows you that they're not spending that much money. All right. David Ross, Cubs manager a few years ago. You look at what he did with the Cubs. I don't think that it's a whole lot different than what Craig Counsell's doing. Don't see a whole lot of difference. And he hasn't gotten an opportunity to be a manager again. And so now hearing that the Nationals could hire him as their bench coach, and I think that would be an excellent hire for them. The one thing that I criticized when the Cubs hired him is that he never at any level managed. Think about this. Tony Vitello, who is a college coach at Tennessee, managed more games than David Ross when he managed the Cubs. And because of that, that I felt like there were times where he didn't have the experience to do the job. And I think now he's got the experience. And on top of that, being a bench coach is the perfect job to platoon yourself to the manager's role, to learn and then, but still not be the guy who has to come up with all the decisions. I mean, you do really help make a lot of them in game and all of that stuff, but you're not the face. And I think eventually he'll get back to that. So I hope he does. He's a really well-liked guy in the organization. And I think that if he would have done this and then the Cubs hired him, I think it would have lasted a lot longer than it did. All right, guys, that does it for today's show. We're keeping an eye on this market. Maybe I'm having pipe dreams with this Kyle Schwarber stuff, but I really do think that he would fit. I think it would be a great reunion. And I think all of us would love to get those Schwarber's jerseys back out again and wear them because he's coming home. The pop that it would have, that Cubs convention would have if this were to happen. All right. Like, subscribe, thumbs up. Thanks for hanging. Again, hit that QR code, and we'll talk to you guys in Avenue D. Appreciate you being here. And don't forget, next vacation, think about the Smoky Mountains in Sevierville. And look, there's talking fish and bears to help you get it.
When you head to the Smoky Mountains, it's only natural to visit Sevierville.
Even we had to check it out.
And we've been here our whole lives.
Experience the adventure of a lifetime.
I'm king of the world.
Even you can get a bird's eye view of the Smokies.
You're going down, Billy. Whoa.
Your Smokies start here.